She deserves the truth, but it'll destroy us. Emma's husband's voice came through crystal clear on the call he forgot to end. Her heart stopped as she heard him confess to his friend. I used her, man. Our whole marriage started as a fraud. 5 years of memories flashed through her mind as she listened to him admit he'd been living a lie. What truth was he hiding that could end everything they'd built together? Welcome to Wacky Storytime TV, where real-life drama, dark twists, emotional betrayals, and unbelievable moments come to life through powerful storytelling. If this story already has your heart racing, please watch, hit that subscribe button, drop a like and comment, because we tell stories here that will keep you up at night. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you stay or would you walk away if you were in Emma's shoes? Now let's get into it. Emma Hartwell was not a woman who flinched. At 32, she had built a billion-dollar empire from a single camera and a relentless eye for beauty. Her photography agency, Hartwell Visuals, had offices in New York, Paris, and Tokyo. She had negotiated with ruthless executives, fired incompetent board members without blinking, and faced hostile acquisitions with the cold precision of a chess grandmaster. Emma did not panic. Emma did not crumble. But sitting in the corner of her penthouse studio, staring at the phone screen that read Marcus 4723 and counting, she felt something crack open inside her chest that no amount of power or money could protect her from. She had been editing aerial shots from their anniversary trip to the Amalfi Coast when Marcus called. She answered, heard him say, "Hold on," and assumed he was switching to a better signal. She placed the phone face up on her editing desk and continued working, but the call never disconnected. And then she heard it. I can't keep doing this, David. I can't keep looking her in the eye every single morning knowing what I know. Marcus's voice was low, urgent, the kind of voice people use when they're confessing in the dark. I married her for the wrong reasons. Our whole marriage started as a fraud. She deserves the truth, but the truth will destroy us. Emma's hand froze over her keyboard. The room didn't spin. She didn't gasp. She simply stopped, the way a clock stops when its battery dies, every function suspended, every thought paralyzed. David's voice came through next, cautious and careful. Marcus, you need to calm down. What you're talking about, coming clean after 5 years, that's not just a conversation. That could be the end of everything. It's already the end, Marcus said, and his voice broke on that last word in a way Emma had never heard before. Not even when they lost the baby, not even at his worst. I used her, man. I used her to get what I needed, and then I couldn't leave. I didn't want to leave, but wanting to stay doesn't erase what I did at the beginning. Emma picked up the phone with both hands. She stared at it like it was a grenade she hadn't realized she'd been holding. 49 minutes and 12 seconds. He had no idea she was still there. He had no idea she could hear every syllable of his unraveling. What exactly are you planning to tell her? David asked. Everything, Marcus said quietly. Everything I should have told her before I ever put a ring on her finger. Emma ended the call. She sat in the silence of her 38th floor studio, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of equipment, framed editorial spreads, and awards that lined the walls like trophies from a life she had fought for. She sat there completely alone, and for the first time in years, she felt like a fool. She thought about the night they met, a gallery opening she had been hired to photograph. Marcus had appeared beside her while she was shooting a particularly abstract installation, and he had said, without introduction, "That piece makes me think about grief, like something beautiful that stopped mid-sentence." She had lowered her camera and looked at him properly. He was tall, quietly handsome, with eyes that looked like they were always processing something deeper than the surface. She had laughed and said, "That's either very profound or a terrible pickup line." He had smiled and said, "Maybe both." She had thought, even then, that there was something careful about him, something measured. She had found it magnetic. Now she wondered if it was something else entirely. She crossed to his private office on the other side of the penthouse, a room she had never invaded in 5 years of marriage. She had respected his boundaries the way she expected hers to be respected, but respect felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. She tried the door, unlocked. She stepped inside. The office was neat in a way that always slightly unsettled her, too organized, like someone who had learned to leave no traces. She moved to his desk, pulled open the top drawer. Pens, a watch she'd gifted him. She tried the second drawer. Locked. She stood there for a long moment, then opened his desk organizer and found a small key tucked beneath a stack of business cards. The drawer opened with a quiet click. Inside was a folder, unremarkable in manila, the kind that could hold tax documents or insurance forms. She opened it with steady hands, the same hands that had signed $100 million contracts without trembling. And there it was, an old passport, Russian. The name read Marcus Volkov. The photograph was undeniably her husband, just younger, thinner, and carrying a weight in his eyes she recognized now as fear. Behind the passport were immigration documents, green card application forms, and there, in black and white, their wedding date listed as the anchor event for his residency status. Emma closed the folder. She placed it on the desk. She sat down in his chair, the one she had custom ordered for him 2 Christmases ago because he had complained his back hurt during long work sessions. She sat in the chair she had bought for the man whose real name she apparently didn't know, and she thought about every single moment she had believed was real. Their first date at that small Italian restaurant where he had ordered for her in perfect Italian, and she had been charmed beyond reason. The weekend trip to Vermont 4 months in, where he had told her she was the most interesting woman he had ever met. The proposal at their park bench, simple and unscripted, where he had said, "I don't have a speech. I just know I don't want to figure out the rest of my life without you." She had cried. She never cried. Had any of it been real? Or had she been, with all her intelligence and all her instincts, nothing more than a transaction? Had Emma Hartwell, the woman who could read a boardroom in 30 seconds flat, been completely and utterly played? She picked up the folder, walked back to her studio, poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink, and sat down to wait for her husband to come home. She heard his key in the lock at 7:43 p.m. She knew because she had been watching the clock on the wall with the kind of focused intensity she usually reserved for closing deals. Every minute that passed between ending that call and hearing that door open had been its own quiet torture. She had not cried. She had not called her sister. She had not contacted her lawyer, though the thought had crossed her mind with cold precision. She had simply sat with the folder on her lap and the silence of a marriage she no longer recognized, waiting for the man she thought she knew to walk through the door. Marcus came in carrying takeout bags from her favorite Thai restaurant, humming something low under his breath, completely unaware that the world had already ended while he was ordering pad see ew and spring rolls. He turned the corner into the living room and stopped. Emma was sitting perfectly still in the high-backed chair facing the entrance, the folder open across her knees, her expression so composed it was terrifying. "Hey," he said carefully, "you okay?" "Close the door, Marcus," she said. "Or should I say Marcus Volkov?" The takeout bags hit the floor. The color drained from his face so completely and so instantly that Emma almost felt something. Almost. He stood frozen in the doorway, his mouth slightly open, his eyes locked on the folder in her hands, with the expression of a man watching a building he thought was still standing suddenly collapse in front of him. "Emma." "Sit down," she said, not loudly, not cruelly, just firmly, the way she ran her boardrooms. "Sit down and do not say my name again until I tell you to." He sat. He perched on the edge of the sofa across from her like a man who understood he had no right to get comfortable. His hands hung between his knees. He looked at the floor, then at her, then at the floor again. "The call didn't disconnect," she said simply. "I heard everything you said to David, every single word." She paused, letting that land. "And then I came in here and I found these." She held up the folder. "So here is what's going to happen. You are going to tell me everything. Not the version that makes you look better. Not the version that protects your feelings or mine. The truth, all of it, starting from the beginning." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. His jaw worked silently. She watched something move across his face, the desperate calculation of a man trying to find an angle, a softening, a place to start that might cushion the blow. And then she watched him abandon it. His shoulders dropped. His hands pressed flat against his thighs, and he began. "My real name is Marcus Volkov," he said. "I grew up in St. Petersburg. My father was connected to people who did very bad things, and he was one of those people. My mother tried to leave him when I was 16. She didn't survive the attempt. He said it flatly, like a man who had learned to carry that sentence by removing all its weight. My sister disappeared 2 years later. I was told it was an accident. I have never believed that. Emma said nothing. She watched him. I fled when I was 21 on a student visa. I had a contact who helped me build a new identity, a new name, a paper trail that could hold up. Marcus Chen. I came to New York, I studied, I worked, I built something small and legitimate, but my visa was expiring. My options were disappearing. I was terrified that if I got deported, I would go back to a country where people who shared my blood would consider me a loose end. He swallowed. So I made a decision. I decided to find someone to marry. The word someone landed between them, like a stone, dropped into still water. You targeted me, Emma said. It was not a question. I attended events where I knew successful, independent women would be. Women who might be flattered by attention, women who had busy lives and might not scrutinize too closely. He stopped, pressed his eyes shut. That sounds even worse out loud. It should, Emma said quietly. I saw you at the gallery. I knew who you were. Emma Hartwell, the photographer turned mogul. I had done research. I thought... He stopped again. Say it, she said. I thought you would be too busy building your empire to look too closely at mine. His voice cracked on the last word. I thought I could be charming enough, attentive enough, that by the time you looked closely, it would be too late to matter. Emma stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline, 38 floors of glittering distance between her and the ground. She had stood at this window 1,000 times with Marcus beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them quietly proud of the life they had assembled. Now she stood alone, and the city looked the same, and she hated it for that. When did it change? She asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands, pressed flat against the glass, were not. Or did it ever? Third date, Marcus said immediately, like the answer had been sitting right behind his teeth for years. We were at that terrible jazz bar you insisted was underrated, and you got into an argument with the bartender about whether Miles Davis would have approved of their cocktail menu. Despite everything, despite the rubble of the moment, something flickered across his face. You were so certain, so completely, unapologetically certain, and I thought, I am in serious trouble. Because I was not supposed to actually fall in love with the woman I was using. Don't, Emma said sharply. I know, he said. I know I don't get to say that right now. I know it doesn't fix anything. I'm just answering your question. She turned from the window. You got your green card 3 years ago. He nodded slowly, knowing exactly where she was going. You have been a citizen for 3 years, Marcus. You could have left. You could have quietly filed for divorce, walked away clean, and I would have eventually moved on. She crossed her arms over her chest, and for the first time, something broke through her composure. Not tears, something harder than tears. So why are you still here? Because leaving you is not something I am capable of, he said. Because somewhere between that jazz bar and our first real fight, and the night we lost the baby, and every ordinary Tuesday morning, where you drink your coffee standing up because you're already thinking about work before you're even fully awake. His voice collapsed entirely. I stopped pretending, and I have spent every day since then trying to be worthy of something I started for the worst possible reasons. Emma stared at him. The man she had shared her bed with, her business wins, her grief, her body, her mornings. The man whose last name she had not taken because she was Emma Hartwell and always would be, a decision she now felt the strange, terrible irony of. She stared at him and felt simultaneously like she knew everything about him and absolutely nothing at all. I need you to leave, she said quietly. Tonight, I need you out of this apartment. Marcus stood immediately. No argument, no pleading. Okay. And Marcus, he stopped. She looked at him with eyes that had built an empire and were now standing in the wreckage of something far more valuable. If one single word of what you just told me turns out to be another lie, I will not just divorce you. I will dismantle everything you have ever built. Do you understand me? He held her gaze. Every word was true, I swear it. She turned back to the window. She listened to him pack a bag. She listened to the door close. And then Emma Hartwell, billionaire, stood alone in her 38-floor penthouse, and finally, for the first time since the call that changed everything, allowed herself to feel the full, devastating weight of what it meant to have loved someone completely and still not have known them at all. 2 weeks, 14 days of silence so complete it had its own texture. Emma had not contacted Marcus once. She had thrown herself into work with the kind of ruthless focus that had built her empire in the first place, scheduling back-to-back meetings, flying to Paris for a client acquisition that could have been handled over video call, filling every waking hour with noise and motion so the quiet couldn't catch her. But the quiet always caught her. At 2 a.m. in her Paris hotel suite. At 6 a.m. in the back of her car on the way to the office. In the 3 seconds between waking up and remembering, before the full weight of it came crashing back down. She had not told her sister everything. Lisa knew there had been a fight, knew Marcus had moved out temporarily, knew Emma was not okay in that particular way. Emma never admitted to not being okay. She had not told her lawyers anything. She had not touched the folder again, which still sat on her studio desk exactly where she had left it. She had not made a single decision. For a woman who made 100 decisions before noon every single day, the paralysis was its own kind of agony. On the 15th day, she called David. She had his number from a charity event they had all attended 2 years prior. She dialed it standing in the middle of her office, not sitting, not packing, just standing, because she needed the steadiness of her own 2 feet beneath her. He answered on the second ring. "Emma, I need you to tell me something," she said without preamble. "And I need you to tell me as his friend, not as someone trying to protect him. Can you do that?" A pause. "I can try." "Is he a good man?" she asked. "Not a perfect man, not a man without sin. I already know the answer to that. I'm asking you something different. Is Marcus Volkov, underneath everything he did and everything he hid, fundamentally a good man?" David was quiet for long enough that Emma almost spoke again. Then he said, "He called me 6 months after your wedding, not to celebrate, not to tell me everything had worked out. He called me because he was falling apart with guilt. He told me he had to come clean to you and I talked him out of it." Another pause. "I told him it would only hurt you and that the marriage was real now, so what was the point? I have thought about that conversation almost every day since." Emma said nothing. "He has loved you in a way that scared him from almost the beginning," David continued. "I have watched that man turn down opportunities, relocate his entire professional life, restructure his ambitions all around yours. Not because you asked him to, because he wanted your world to be the one they built together. That's not performance, Emma. That's not a man running a con." He exhaled slowly. "That's a man who knows he started something wrong and has spent every day since trying to build something right." She thanked him and ended the call. She stood at her office window, the New York skyline laid out before her like a map of everything she had ever wanted and worked for and claimed. And she thought about something Marcus had said the night she sent him away, something she had been circling for 2 weeks without landing on directly. "I stopped pretending, and I have spent every day since trying to be worthy of something I started for the worst possible reasons." She thought about what it meant to build something on a broken foundation. In business, she had done it more than once, acquired companies that were fundamentally flawed and restructured them from the ground up, stripped them back to the studs, and rebuilt with better materials and stronger intent. The world called those her greatest victories, the turnarounds, the redemptions. She picked up her phone and sent Marcus one message. "Meet me at the park. Saturday, 11 a.m., the bench." He replied in under a minute, "I'll be there." Saturday arrived gray and cold, the kind of February morning that made Manhattan look like a film still, all muted tones and bare trees and breath visible in the air. Emma arrived first. She sat on the bench where he had proposed 5 years ago, the same bench where he had said, "I don't have a speech. I just know I don't want to figure out the rest of my life without you." And she sat with that memory and let it exist alongside everything she now knew without trying to make them fit neatly together. Because they didn't fit neatly. That was the truth she had spent 2 weeks arriving at. None of this was neat. None of this was clean. Real things rarely were. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. He came around the path looking like a man who had not slept properly in 2 weeks, which she suspected was accurate. He was wearing the charcoal coat she had bought him last winter. She noticed that and felt something move through her that she didn't try to name. He stopped a few feet from the bench, not presuming to sit, waiting for her direction the way he had the night she sent him away. "Sit down," she said. He sat, not close, careful. They were quiet for a moment, both of them looking ahead at the gray park, the bare trees, a dog walker threading between them in the middle distance. "I spoke to David," Emma said. Marcus nodded slowly. "He told me." "You called him 6 months into our marriage," she said. "You wanted to confess. He talked you out of it." "Yes." "Why didn't you go against his advice? You were already falling in love with me by your own account. Why didn't you trust that?" Marcus turned to look at her properly for the first time since he sat down. "Because I was terrified," he said simply. "Not of losing the green card, not of legal consequences. I was terrified of watching you look at me the way you looked at me the night I told you the truth, like I was a stranger, like everything you thought you knew had just been reclassified as a lie." His jaw tightened. "I couldn't face it. I kept telling myself I'd find the right moment. And then the right moment kept not being right, and the years kept passing, and the love kept getting bigger, and the secret kept getting heavier, and I—" He stopped, pressed his hands together. "I was a coward. I have no better explanation than that." Emma looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and placed something on the bench between them. It was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. He looked at it without touching it. "That is not divorce papers," she said. "It is a therapist's information, couples counseling. She specializes in trust reconstruction after deception, and I have already had an intake call with her, and she has availability starting next week." She paused. "I also sent her my own appointment for Thursday, individually, because this is not only about what you did, it is also about why I missed it, and what I need to understand about myself." Marcus stared at the paper. His throat worked. "I am not forgiving you today," Emma said clearly. "I want to be very precise about that. What you did was a violation of my trust and my autonomy and my right to make an informed decision about my own life. That does not disappear because you eventually fell in love with me. Feeling real love does not retroactively make a fraudulent beginning honest." She held his gaze. "But I have built entire companies out of broken foundations. I have taken things that started wrong and made them into something extraordinary through sheer force of intention and work." She paused. "I am willing to find out if a marriage can survive the same process." Something crossed Marcus's face that was almost too raw to look at directly. He picked up the paper carefully. The way you pick up something you understand is both fragile and enormously significant. "I will do whatever it takes," he said. "Every session, every hard conversation, every moment of honesty, even when it costs me. I will not waste this." His voice dropped. "I have not deserved you from the beginning, but I would like, if you'll allow it, to spend the rest of my life becoming someone who does." Emma stood. She buttoned her coat against the cold. She looked at him one last time on that bench, this man she had loved completely and been deceived by fundamentally and chosen deliberately. And she felt the full, complicated weight of all three of those things existing simultaneously without canceling each other out. "Don't be late on Thursday," she said. And she walked back down the path through the gray February morning, her steps steady, her direction clear, carrying the particular quiet courage of a woman who had every reason to walk away and had chosen instead to build. 1 year later, they stood in the same park on a warm October afternoon, laughing at something the photographer had said. Emma had hired someone else to shoot the vow renewal, insisting she couldn't be behind a camera at her own ceremony. Marcus had written his vows by hand, 3 drafts, the final one beginning with the words, "I will not tell you I deserve this. I will only tell you I know what it is worth." Their guests said it was the most beautiful thing they had ever heard. Emma thought it was the most honest thing he had ever said. And perhaps that was exactly where they needed to start. If this story moved you, wrecked you, or made you question everything you thought you knew about love and second chances, then you are exactly where you belong. Hit that like button right now, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below by telling us, would you have walked away or would you have stayed to rebuild? We read every single comment, and your answer might just inspire our next story. See you in the next one.